Okay, hi, thank you all for coming out, and this is our second live book news. We're very excited to be here live.
No other way.
And alive too, yes. So we organized this a little differently. I created themes for all the books. And we're going to start with family dynamics set in contemporary times. So the first book I'm going to talk about, The Lover by Rebecca Sachs. You may be familiar with Rebecca Sachs. She wrote City of a Thousand Gates previously, about a couple years ago, which is about contemporary Israel. And in it, she shows the lives of average Israelis and Arabs in the city of Jerusalem. And in this book, one of her main characters is an American married to an active duty soldier. And through this character, through the woman, the American, we see the conflict as only an outsider can. She takes a rather similar theme in her new book, The Lover. In that, she has a young woman who's a Canadian, who's half Jewish, and she has a love affair with an Israeli soldier who is sent to the Gaza during the invasion. In an article for Literary Hub, author Rebecca Sachs says that she wrote The Lover to meet an alternate version of herself. Like, she herself moved to Tel Aviv in 2014. She was out of college and she was working in Vanity Fair. And then she left that position and became a graduate student in Tel Aviv. Like the character, she kept renewing her study visa, and then she became an Israeli citizen. What's troubling about this book is not the age difference between the character and the soldier. She's 27 and he's a mere 19. So that's a little sketchy, you know, but and Clarice pointed out there's a lot of eroticism in the book. I guess I was looking for, you know, bigger political themes and what's missing. And she said, what?
You recommended that my husband and I would listen together.
Right.
And I started it and said, no, this is not what.
Yeah. She began to wonder about, well, Sarah, what?
What do you listen with your husband?
Yeah,
That's
right.
what I wondered.
Yeah, not that. I didn't. Anyway. Anyway, in this book, Allison begins as an observer, ideologically with a foot in both camps, but her intense need for family and for a sense of belonging makes her choose sides, and she talks a lot about that. The book deals with intense romantic love, but also with the moral questions that individuals must face day in and day out when they live in a country besieged by conflict. It explores PTSD. The beauty of Rebecca Sachs's writing is that you feel the intense emotions of the characters and you understand the choices she made. I actually read this book 3 times. Well, I listened to it once and I read it twice. She deals a lot with etymology. I guess we were seeing different things, Clarice, you know. So biblical Hebrew versus modern Hebrew. She herself studied languages, and I love that part of it. It's just a beautiful book. In a blog post I wrote for the library, I said, in beautiful prose, Rebecca Sachs interweaves the Odyssey by Homer, The Lover by Marguerite Duras, the Talmud, as well as Hebrew etymology. This is literary fiction at its finest. And we have a copy of City of 1,000 Gates. If anyone would like it, I'll just put it here. I couldn't get the lover, but place your holds on it. So the next book I'm going to talk about is Beyond That the Sea by Laura Spence Ash. Of late, there have been a few books that deal with what is known as Operation Pied Piper, which was the edict that was carried out in England in September of 1939, just prior to the Blitz, in which all the children of London were to be sent out of London, either to the countryside or to the United States. And both of these books, Secret Book of Flora Lee, which was wonderful, and as well as Beyond That the Sea, deal with this topic and the effect on the children, as well as the families who had to send their children away, and the families who took them in and then had to part with those children. 5 years is a huge amount of time for a child who's, under, just a preteen and having to start a new life and then to be ripped again from that life. In the first novel, The Secret Book of Flora Lee by Patty Callahan Henry, I know, I loved it. And I so recommend it. I think we had a copy up there. So in that book, there are two sisters, 14-year-old Hazel and 5-year-old Flora Leah, and they come to live with a caring family just outside of Oxfordshire countryside along the River Thames. The elder girl, with her vivid imagination, invents stories about the magical land of Whisperwood, whose verdant landscape mirrors the idyllic surroundings of their temporary home. If you like fairy tales and reading, this book is absolutely for you. It was just, the scenery described, it was just beautiful. I'm not spoiling anything because you learn right at the beginning that this little child, the 5-year-old, goes missing. And the elder daughter, Hazel, 14-year-old Hazel, blames herself. And you don't know what happened to that child. So for the next 20 years, this book goes like 20, 25 years in the future, you see the impact on Hazel. And it's got a mystery to it. It's just amazing. By contrast, Beyond That the Sea tells the story of 11-year-old Beatrice Thompson, who was sent to the States for safety. She too is fortunate in terms of the family who offers her shelter, and she is absorbed into a pretty wealthy Boston clan who have a summer cottage, and I think they own this island off the coast of Maine. The author explores the psychological impact of taking a child from his or her home of origin and transplanting that child into a different family for the duration of the war. Most of these children spent 5 formative years away from home. What were the lasting consequences for those children and on their relationships with their families? Both authors also deal with class and gender issues in a really interesting way, because in both cases, the children are more middle or lower class, and the sort of adoptive families have more. They're a little wealthier. The Secret Book of Flora Lee is both historical fiction and mystery. It also tips its hat to the magic of fairy tales and the power of reading. Beyond that, The Sea is a family saga, a romance, and historical fiction at its best. Thank you. Great.
Great, and I have another story of parent-child relationships. This one is wrapped up in a thriller. My first selection is Whalefall, a novel by Daniel Kraus. And in this thriller, a scuba diver gets swallowed alive by a 60-foot-long, 80-ton sperm whale. While the concept might sound biblical, it reads less like something out of the Old Testament and more like something like Andy Weir's The Martian, a scientifically accurate, minute-by-minute tale of survival. 19-year-old Jay Gardner is the son of Mick Gardner, a scuba diver known up and down the California coast for his skill and iconoclastic views. Following Mick's death, Jay takes a dive in one of Dad's favorite spots. At the edge of an undersea canyon, he encounters a giant squid. Seconds later, the giant squid's only natural predator, the sperm whale. In a matter of seconds, the whale swallows up Jay and prey, and Jay is in the first of the whale's 4 stomachs, a pulsating sac. Further down the digestive tract is the whale's second stomach, a chamber full of methane, stomach acid, and squid beaks. Obviously, he can't stay inside the whale, but getting out might be even more dangerous. Sperm whales routinely dive to depths of 2,000 feet or more, and with Jay's loadout, he can't survive beyond 120. And if he gets out, he can't just swim straight up. Divers need to make a controlled descent to keep themselves from getting the bends, the deadly condition of nitrogen bubbles forming in the bloodstream. And maybe worst of all, he only has about 20 minutes of oxygen left in his tank. If Whalefall were just a fast-paced, scientifically accurate survival story, it would be beyond solid. But there's an emotional core that gives it some real heft. Chapters alternate between Jay's current predicament in the whale and flashbacks that recount his childhood and teenage years living with Mitt. Mitt was not Father of the Year material, but flashbacks to Mitt and other friends and family give him the knowledge and inspiration he needs to fight for his survival. And these narratives come together to make a very engaging read. Plus, I learned a lot about whales, scuba diving, and undersea environments. When I finished this book, I did something I almost never do. I went and read the acknowledgement section, where the author talks about all of the books and marine biologists he consulted to make the book as accurate as possible. So if you are an ecologically minded reader or a fan of white knuckle thrillers, give Whalefall a read. It came out in August and is available from the library.
All right, so we're moving now from family dynamics to romance with social issues. So we're continuing with a little bit of a scientific trend. So Allie Hazelwood published her first young adult novel, Checked and Mate. It comes out on November 7th, which is why it's in this lovely display. For those who don't know, Hazelwood is actually a pen name. She is a researcher and a professor of neuroscience. So reading about a study that I'll discuss in a moment, Hazelwood became really interested in chess, and the book we have before us is kind of a result of that. So in 2008, a study was published about women playing online chess against male opponents in their same rating bracket. When female players didn't know the gender of their opponents, they won 50% of the games. When the female players were led to believe that their opponent was a woman, they won 50% of the games. When they were told that they were playing against men, performance dropped. This is just one example of the gender gap being highlighted in studies that Allie Hazelwood found interesting, and as an undergraduate scientific researcher, inspired her to then eventually write her chess book. So this novel hooked me from the beginning. I have personally played chess, but I have never felt the elation that the players in Check and Mate feel. That it's not relevant whether or not you love chess. It's about the pulse pounding, the eyes speeding across the page. You are so excited for them. This is a story about love, yes, but it's a story about passion for intellectual pursuit and the joy of the game. I have never been this invested in chess. Some may remember America's recent fascination with chess after the release of the popular Netflix show The Queen's Gambit, in which chess set purchases increased by about 1,100%, and the number of games played per day on chess doubled in that calendar year. I felt like this book made the game of chess feel similarly exciting. Allie Hazelwood breaks through that glass ceiling with this fabulous story of a young woman who has taken a break from playing chess, even though she loves it, and finds herself in a position where now she has to do it. Of course, yes, there's a boy. And of course, they're both the best at chess, but that's not what this book is about. This book is about balancing your life when you're just becoming an adult at 18. It's about what it means to want to do something versus what it means to have to do something. Something adults and young adults can truly relate to. I found this story to be laugh out loud funny, it's very intelligent, and it was fiercely feminist. Check out this knockout, swoony young adult romance, check-in mate, on the young adult bookshelf. It's a little over a month, November 7th.
Hey, hi everyone. I'll be talking about, can you hear me well here? Yes. I will So I'll be talking about Hello Stranger by Catherine Sunter. If you read her other books, their other books are very inspirational and warm. Usually the main character faces a struggle or trauma, and then she goes through how they deal with that throughout the book. So this one is an heartwarming novel. It's sweet, but it's not spicy. It has a lot of depth, and the main character is Sadie. Now, Sadie, she wakes up one morning after an injury, and she has face blindness. Our doctor tells her it's a temporary condition. Now, she doesn't know for sure. She all of a sudden can't see faces the way most of us do. She sees faces as jumbled pieces of puzzle, basically. So she can recognize people based on their voices and what they wear. So this is an adjustment for her, obviously. And she's basically a portrait artist. So you can see how it could affect her work and her everyday, and how is she supposed to paint portraits when she can't see faces? So she actually gets accepted into a contest right before she gets the injury. And so she has to figure out how to adjust to that new condition. And her day-to-day challenges, for example, even watching TV, she can't follow the characters unless like she gets used to their voices and what they wear, because otherwise you can't really, keep track of what's going on in the plot if she can't see the faces and recognize them. So one day she comes back to her apartment building, and her evil stepsister, which is actually she's actually evil. Her name is Parker, and she basically, her goal in life is to make Sadie's life miserable, because during high school she turned her friends and her family against her. So poor Sadie had to be all alone pretty early on as a teen, just trying to adjust, being on her own. But at least she has her good friend Sue. And actually Sue's father is the landlord of the building, Mr. Kim, and he's a very kind man, and the whole family is very kind. And one day, Sadie's dog gets sick, and so she takes her dog to the emergency vet, Dr. Oliver Edison. And the way he walks, the way he talks, she thinks, oh, he's so handsome, but she can't really see him. So she just decides in her mind, oh, he's going to be my future husband. So even though she's going through all this new conditions, she's just had developed a crush toward the vet. And she finds a reason to keep visiting the vet so she can keep seeing him. Not seeing him, but seeing the rest, what he's wearing, because his face is still jumbled up. So the story is very very readable and it's a unique storyline. You don't find a lot of fiction books that have the main character that has face blindness. So you can see that the author did a really good research about face blindness, because there are two different types. There is developmental one and there is acquired. Developmental, you are born with and you can recognize people's faces for the first time, but then you can't remember the face for future interactions. And acquired face blindness is after an injury. And this is what Sadie has, the main character. The author Emily Henry, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with her. She called it a perfect 10 of a book. The writing is actually light considering the serious condition that Sadie is facing, and other themes such as loss and family issues. The Dallas Morning News calls Catherine Center's stories satisfying and the most soul-nourishing way. I will describe this book exactly in that way, because I got out of it a lot of warmth, and I think that it's a romance with substance, which is usually the type of books that I go for. So I do recommend this one. And you can see them in the cover. That's Sadie, and that's one of the two men. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention, she actually develops a crush toward two different men. One of them is Joe, and he lives in her apartment building, but she thinks he's a womanizer, but the landlord is convinced is very kind because he always helps everybody, and he tries to help her out. So now she has this conflict, trying to pick which one of the men she likes best without seeing their faces. So yeah, this is I recommend this one to you, and we go to the next one. The next one is Kissing Kosher. I thought you probably think the title is a little bit funny. It is very catchy. So this book talks about two rival bakeries. There is the Lipman Bakery that Ethan's grandpa started, and the Best Babka in Brooklyn that Avital Cohen's family started. And so the author that wrote this book is Jean Meltzer, and she herself actually has a chronic fatigue syndrome. And so a lot of the characters that she has in her books are dealing with a type of a chronic condition. And so that's why it's a romance also with substance. And that's why I like this one. Avital Cohen is the manager of her family's kosher bakery, Best Babka in Brooklyn. And she has to deal with this chronic pelvic pain. Now she did not pursue her photography career because of that condition. And she feels responsible for her family to manage the bakery. And sometimes her pain flares up, but she has to deal with her condition as well as managing the bakery with her brother, Josh. What I like about the book that they have the dialogue between the siblings. And I have two brothers, so I can relate to that. And they have really close relationship of support, but they also joke around a lot. So that's what I like about it as well. Now the Liebman's family bakery, the grandpa, the one who started the bakery, which is the rival bakery, sends his grandson to the rival bakery, Best Babka in Brooklyn. So he sends him to steal their pumpkin spice babka recipe. And he wants him to work for them under the disguise that is just, he went to culinary school, which he didn't. But he pretends that he knows how to bake and he knows what he's doing. And at the beginning, they don't even let him bake. They just let him do things around the kitchen and take out the trash and all these things that a newbie would do in a bakery. So one problem, Ethan starts to like Avital. And not just her, he starts to like the whole staff of the bakery. And then it becomes really hard for him. Like he has to pick, what is he gonna steal the recipe, or is he, gonna continue that relationship or friendship and that he developed with Avital, and they really start to care for each other. So would he stay loyal to his grandpa's bakery or not? And would Avital find out that he's actually under disguise and he's actually not there as a professional baker? So it's a heartwarming story about second chances and the challenges of chronic illness, of course, and love. So let's see what happens. Would they end their year-long rivalry between the bakeries, or they would keep that going? So you can read the book to find out more.
So we just finished our 3 books with romance with social issues. The last 2 dealt with physical disability, and Kantika is my book. We're going to start. We have 3 books that would be under the theme history as a determinant of the present. The book I'm going to discuss, Kantika by Elizabeth Graver. When I was listening to Shira, I was thinking that a big part of this book deals with a child with cerebral palsy who was, there was problems in the birth, but we're in the 30s and 40s, and it was very interesting to see when really almost nothing was done for a child. There was a doctor who in the 40s, he started to make some inroads, and he had a hospital for children like this. But that comes later in this book. Kantika, I was told, is the book club book for there's a temple on Sheridan Road in Glencoe. North Shore congregation. I didn't realize that. So this is historical fiction, and I picked it because, with the plight of immigrants so much in the news now, I was attracted to this title. It is a fictionalized version of a true story. The author, when in the late 1980s, when she was just 21, she started taping her grandmother, who was an unusual woman, and she didn't know a whole lot about her. But this woman, her grandmother, became the focal point for this novel. And it takes this family, her family, the author's family, the scope of over 50 years from the early 1900s to 1950, as it follows one Sephardic Jewish family from the Ottoman Empire, now Turkey, to Barcelona, Spain, and then to Havana, Cuba, and finally to New York. So the book is in many ways a personal history of the Sephardic Jews in Europe between the 2 world wars. After the Jews were expelled from Spain and Portugal during the Inquisition, many went to the Ottoman Empire, and they were accepted and welcomed into the Ottoman Empire, which at that time was a pretty open society, or a pretty tolerant society. You had Muslims and Jews and Christians all living together, no big problems. Those Jews developed a language of their own called Ladino, which is basically pre-Inquisition Spanish mixed with other contact languages such as Hebrew, Arabic, and Turkey. Eventually, it included French because Jews were sent to Catholic schools in the Ottoman Empire, and that was the official language in the schools. So Rebecca's grandmother was I'm sorry, Elizabeth's grandmother, Rebecca, was a very knowledgeable woman. She came from a wealthy family. Her father was a trader, and later he owned a clothing, not a clothing, they made clothing in a factory. However, with nationalism and populism and the Ottoman Empire became Turkey. That's when everything changed and Jews were no longer looked upon favorably. And her father, the factory was taken from him. They lived in fear. This was also the time with the Armenian genocide by the Turks in that area. So things changed with nationalism. And he was told he could become a shamus at a temple in Spain. And that was hard, he said, but this is the land of your origin. It didn't feel like the land of his origin anymore. For a few hundred years, he had now lived in Turkey. So he went with the family, and now his circumstances and that of the family were greatly reduced. It was near poverty for them. But the author, excuse me, spends a lot of time talking about land. I learned a great deal. This was fiction, but also I knew so little about the history in that period of that part of Europe. It talks a lot about language about Ladino. Ladino is a language of many layers and primarily an oral language. At the same time, it was truly the language of the home and the container for folklore, stories, and beautiful songs. In fact, the title, Kantika, means song in Ladino. And songs infuse this novel. Another theme of this book is gardening. Her father and the author herself, they're all avid gardeners, and there's a lot of talk about plants. And when Rachel's father is forced to leave, they can take very few things with them, as most people who have to leave a place. But in one suitcase, he puts seeds and bulbs and trying to relocate those plants with him back to Spain. So when the Ottoman Empire falls, replaced by the nationalist government of Turkey, the textile factories confiscated, it became unsafe. Okay, so I talked about that. Kantika also tackles the subject of disability, basing it on the real life story of Luna Levy, Rebecca's stepdaughter. So Rebecca, during when World War I begins and then World War II starts and Hitler is coming, the family pushes Rebecca to leave, even though it's very dangerous. And a friend that she had back in Turkey, who now lives in the States and has married, it was her best friend. She has passed away, and Rebecca eventually marries her husband, her now widowed husband, and they meet in Cuba. So now you're in Barcelona, and then you're in New York. So there's a lot of, time changes, plot changes. That widower has a daughter with cerebral palsy, who's only about 6 years old at the time. There is so much about that daughter and how she was still in diapers, she was nonverbal, nothing. And Rebecca, who has healing qualities, she was a healer. She takes it upon herself to help this child. And that's and knowing that it was true made it even more interesting. This is a hopeful book and a tribute to the strength of some indomitable women like Graeber's grandmother Rebecca and her aunt Luna. it's a beautiful book. There's so much in it. There was no way of summing it up. So sorry if I spoke too long. Thank you.
Keeping on some of the important multi-generational stories, but this is a smaller scale. The Invisible Hour by Alice Hoffman. It's about a young woman who, at the very beginning of the novel, we find out very early, discovers she is unexpectedly pregnant and must make choices that affect not only her, but her daughter, Mia, whose story we also follow. This book is wonderful and very timely. It's a love letter to those who love reading, an exploration of bodily autonomy. It has themes of found family. It's a story that draws many parallels to the Scarlet Letter and modern day. It weaves a damning condemnation of leaving someone without choice, others, and most of all, hope. Though through the real and the magical, as Alice Hoffman is known to do, Nathaniel Hawthorne, author of the famed The Scarlet Letter, is given complimentary treatment through the novel by Hoffman. And The Scarlet Letter becomes a very important book throughout Mia, that we spend most of our heroine's life. Some may find the magical elements of this novel a bit surprising, as they are not actually introduced in the beginning of the novel. However, I found them to be a nice reprieve from the pretty harsh realities that Hoffman puts her main character through, including living in a cult. So Alice Hoffman asked the question, when all hope is lost, where should we turn to but the magical and fantastical world of books? If we are not given books, how will we know what life can offer? These questions are asked with an enthralling prose that captured me from the beginning to the end. I was struck especially by the theme Hoffman explores of freedom found in books, because the cult that the heroine lives at doesn't allow any books. She says, in a place where books are banned, there could be no personal freedom, no hope, and no dreams for the future. Found that to be really timely. Hoffman's examination of choice will feel especially relevant for modern readers, as will the power of giving books to those who need them at the time they need them. Hoffman's thesis is pretty clear. So while this is short, it's brief, it's captivating, it's lyrical, and it's so excellent. I was really excited every time I open this book up. So I hope you'll like it too.
All right, and I have another story of magic and mysticism in the present day. You might be familiar with the Golem, which is easily the coolest creature in Jewish mythology. He's a humanoid giant who's sculpted from clay or mud and brought to life to protect the Jews in their time of need. But what would happen if a golem appeared in contemporary New York City? Adam Mansbach explores the possibility in his latest novel, The Golem of Brooklyn. One summer afternoon, Brooklynite Len Bronstein gets super high and makes a golem out of 400 pounds of clay that he's stolen from the private school where he teaches art. You might be wondering, why does he do this? It's his way of dealing with writer's block. The golem comes to life, learns English from watching episodes of Curb Your Enthusiasm, and then expresses confusion as to why he's needed in this contemporary setting. That is, until Len's new friend, Miri, an ex-Orthodox who left the community for good reason, shows the golem cell phone video of tiki torch-wielding white supremacists chanting, "Jews will not replace us." The golem soon understands why his ancient powers are needed in the modern world. Before long, the golem and his humans are road tripping to a tiny town in Kentucky. A Confederate statue is being removed from the town square, and white supremacist organizations are gearing up to protest the move in a Charlottesville-style rally. To Len's unease and Miri's delight, the golem is headed down to take out the neo-Nazi trash. This book has it all. Yiddish profanity, Nazi clobbering, Larry David, and a chapter told from the point of view of a bodega cat. But it also raises some important and timely questions about faith and community. How do you keep the faith when others want you dead because of it? Does vengeance have a place in the healing process? Is the secret to making the world a better place really just getting to know your neighbors? Don't expect any easy answers here. Adam Mansbach has been one of my favorite writers for years now for the way he can get such emotion out of these absurd situations. So maybe you like finding the emotional in the absurd. Or maybe you like books like Helene Wecker's The Golem and the Genie, but thought it could have used more clouds of weed smoke. Or maybe you like stories about created giants like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, or even movies like Big Hero 6 or The Iron Giant. If any of that sounds like something you would like, The Golem of Brooklyn is the book for you. It came out last week and is available from the library.
And now for something completely different. I couldn't work a better transition. The books are just very different. So we're on to some nonfiction now. We're gonna change gears. This is Exit Interview, the life and death of my ambitious career by Christy Coulter. I was attracted to this by the title alone, so maybe that'll get you too. So this is a book that I found so captivating that I couldn't wait to get back to it. I was putting off my other life just so I could find out what happened next. This is a workplace memoir. It describes over a decade of work at Amazon. It starts in 2006 and ends in 2018. So Coulter's previous work had capped on her potential, and she found herself bored and looking for a challenge. Little did she know, Amazon was a challenge more than she could comprehend. Coulter's memoir speaks in such a candid way, but it's pretty fair for the office environment at Amazon and how it evolved over her tenure there. It's a culture of where people have been asked to do the impossible, and that's the norm, such as doubling or tripling workloads with no warning or suggestion for how to achieve this feat. While at the same time, she describes the passion and excitement she had in the beginning for the work she was doing and how engaging it was to mold herself into the role she was cast in. She talks of the intensely stressful workplace full of harried, insecure employees constantly being asked to stretch what they can do in reorganizations of the company. However, she also adds that this kind of lunacy was addicting for her people-pleasing nature, which I felt very relatable. Fascinatingly, Coulter describes a workplace so embedded and yet disconnected from the actual work that when articles come out about the poor warehouse conditions at Amazon, she's reminded of how things are actually done for the first time in 5 years at the company. Coulter's memoir also examines sexism in the workplace, something that could be of interest to anyone with this kind of experience. She gives prime examples of both large transgressions and microaggressions she experienced, which also highlighting the often antagonistic advice given to women in the workforce. For instance, make sure to finish a thought if a man interrupts you, but not in a way that will make him feel like he did something wrong. There are little interstitials throughout this type of advice and how she'd advise changing them that are woven into the narrative. And you can see how her stress elevates and interacts with her workplace and ambitions and her gender. Sometimes something I feel particularly moving was Coulter's struggle to be a whole person and deal with the Amazon workload. She is quoted at one point saying, "But Amazon as we know it wouldn't exist without 1,000 tiny acts of self-destruction every day." I will not tell you how her ending at Amazon came to be, or the detailed account she provides in this very thorough workplace memoir. What I will say is that it's fascinating to know what's going on behind the curtain. This is one of the world's largest conglomerates, and it's from the eyes of a very driven, very ambitious woman. For anyone who likes a hit the ground running story, this one's for you. When I told Jake about the story, he actually said it reminded him of another one from a few years ago, Uncanny Valley, that we have over there. So check this out. It is fascinating.
Okay, we are another nonfiction book. Also actually a big transition because this one talks about good and healthy habits as opposed to not healthy habits. So this one is the Blue Zone Secrets for Living Longer, Lessons from the Healthiest Places on Earth by Dan Buettner. If you're familiar with the Blue Zone books, or Blue Zone, some of it are cookbooks or diet. Dan Buettner wrote actually a good amount of these books in the past, and they've been bestsellers. So here, he's actually the founder of Blue Zones. And so this is an organization that helps Americans live longer and healthier lives. He researched longevity for over 20 years. So he actually also won a Guinness record for biking. So he's a very interesting person, and he traveled all around the globe to research about longevity, and he tries to bring some of these healthy habits into the US. He basically revisited the Blue Zone locations. The ones that he talks about are Sardinia. It's an island west of the Italian peninsula. Nicoya in Costa Rica. And we actually have a place in the US, Loma Linda in California. Ikaria is a Greek island in Okinawa, Japan, which is known for longevity. I'm sure a lot of you heard about Okinawa and the lifestyle there. And there's a lot of people that live over 100 over there. And he also added another Blue Zone. So there were 5. The 6th one is Singapore. What he found that all these communities have in common, it's a lot of things we heard previously about longevity. So he basically talks about, having a meaningful life, being part of community. He talks about the importance of having free time. So being able to rest and have a place in your house where you can just unplug and relax is very essential for longevity. And the diet, of course. So he talks about plant-based eating, and I know a lot of cookbooks talk about it. But he takes basically interviews from people that he met in these different locations, and then writes about it. He talks about different types of Blue Zone foods, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and so on. It includes also some recipes and superfoods, and I can also show you, they have really beautiful pictures. Actually, the National Geographic photographers took the photos for this book. So the pictures here are really pretty as well. So he also talks about some Blue Zone activities and habits such as gardening. Obviously reducing the amount of TV watching, because when you watch TV, it encourages you to snack a lot. So this is like one of the things that he talks about. Owning pets, probably heard about the therapeutic effect of having a pet, especially a dog. And exercising, resting, and also he talks about a wall of accomplishment. Some people have that in their house, where they have different awards that they received or pictures, and it's important to have pictures from happy moments in your life. So every time you pass that place in your house, you see, it reminds you of these happy moments in your life. So if you're interested in this book, there's actually a Netflix series that maybe you might have heard of. So this is called Live to 100, Secrets of the Blue Zones. It was released in August. This book is useful and has interesting information. Actually, the way it's written is very interesting. So I kept reading and reading just to find out more healthy habits and trying to incorporate in my own lifestyle as well. So this is the book, and you will enjoy the photography as well in there. Okay.
So Shira, do you know what lives even longer than the longest lived humans? It is turtles, of course. My final selection is Of Time in Turtles, Mending the World Shell by Shattered Shell, written by Cy Montgomery and illustrated by Matt Patterson. The acclaimed nature writer chronicles her experiences at a New England turtle hospital. You might not give them much thought, but turtles really are amazing creatures. They've been on Earth for about 250 million years, meaning they walked alongside the first dinosaurs. Sea turtles can migrate thousands of miles to return to the very same beaches where they hatched to lay more eggs. And the first animals to orbit the moon were a pair of Russian tortoises. But turtles have never been in as much trouble as they're in now. Cars, habitat destruction, and the exotic pet trade are threatening numerous species in a way that 250 million years of evolution and mass extinctions never did. That's where the Turtle Rescue League comes in. Staffed by a pair of dedicated women, Alexia and Natasha mend cracked shells, carry snappers across busy roads, and rehabilitate dozens of turtles in the basement of their central Massachusetts home. Montgomery and her friend Matt, an exceptionally talented wildlife artist who supplied the illustrations, and seriously, wait until you see his drawings. You're going to think that they're photographs, but they are colored pencil pictures. Participate in turtle rescue and recovery over the seasons. So those are the turtles of the title, but what about the time? Shortly after they started visiting, the world shut down due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Lockdowns and social isolation distorted our sense of time. The pandemic also coincided with Montgomery entering her mid-60s and feeling like she was entering a new phase in her life. The secret to accepting and even thriving amid lockdowns and aging, she realizes, is slowing down and living like a turtle. Turtles are famously long-lived. Some species can live over 2 centuries, and a captive female tortoise even laid eggs at age 145. This long lifespan means that turtles live on a slower scale than we do. Medicine that would take minutes or hours to affect mammals can take weeks to affect turtles, and physical therapy can take years. This makes turtle recovery a slow process, but they do recover. Progress happens, but it happens slowly. You just have to be a turtle about it. Of Time in Turtles is a must-read for anyone who likes books about natural history, conservation, and the human-animal bond. If you're not a fan of turtles already, it is certainly going to make you one. Came out last month and is available from the Glencoe Library. And that is it for our fall 2023 book news. You've been such a great audience, and I just want to remind you that we do have a survey for feedback. We have paper versions. There's also a QR code on the back of the program. So thank you very much.